Good morning. How are you, Bill? Good to see you here. I'll catch up with you later. What I'd be interested in is how you're enjoying the summit, but we'll talk about that offline. Great to see you here, everybody, at the Now Write Your Book Summit. If you're watching live, fantastic. Post your comments in the chat and we'll answer your questions. I'm also collating the observations and insights that you post there as well, so I'll put those in the notes later on. We have a podcast, which many of these interviews came from. And if you want to go to iTunes and go to search for Authors Channel, you'll find us there. We also have the audio and the videos posted with transcripts and articles and other resources at authors.fm. If you're looking for more practical help, then also you should go to youshouldwriteabook.co.uk. It's the title of a new book that Jackie and I, my wife and business partner, are publishing very, very soon. Should be available by the end of this month if you're reading this in May 2020. So, go and get the toolkit. There is toolkit. There is a checklist there which will take you through every step of the process of writing a book, and a software app that'll help you to hold yourself accountable while you write your book. But today, let me introduce you in this summit session to Daniel Priestley. Daniel Priestley is a guy who has built a massive training company called Dent Global. Dent Global. If you remember the quote from Steve Jobs said, "There's no point in being small. You're here to make a dent in the universe." So Daniel is making a dent with Dent Global. So entrepreneurs go to their workshops, go to their seminars, and he's written a series of amazing books. Most recent one that I have is 24 Assets. What are the things that you need to do that you need to have as assets in your business to create a digital, scalable, valuable, and fun business that will thrive in a fast changing world. We do talk about this in the interview as well. There are other books that Daniel has written. Probably the first one that put him on the map was Key Person of Influence. How can you become a key person of influence? But let me just say at this stage, we've got, I think a shift of focus is happening here. So if you were here on the summit yesterday, we were talking mainly about why write a book. The summit interviews today with Steve Berry, Peter Lorange, Alok Sinha, have so far been a little bit about how you write books, how you put things together, what you should be considering, whether you go for mainstream publishers or self-published. This afternoon, we'll be talking to Marshall Goldsmith on how you showcase and demonstrate your services in a book. And Karen Dillon on how you write your book. How can you create an engaging and an inspiring book through storytelling? So stories and storytelling, the arc that you create in your book, is something else that we've been dealing with a little bit today. And we'll close the session, the summit today, with an interview with Steve Piersanti. So if you're watching this on the replay, after this, go to Steve Piersanti interview, because he talks about how to write a really great book and also some issues there to do with marketing. More on those another time. I want to introduce you to Daniel Priestley. Daniel is a guy who pulls no punches. He's very, very blunt and very direct. Very much a prescriptive, do this, do this, do this. But nevertheless, very, very powerful message here. Daniel Priestley, I think, is this is for me one of the highlights of the summit. It changed my mind on a few things, and maybe we'll touch on that later on. I hope you've got a notebook. I hope there are some pages left in it. I hope you have more than 2 pens, or if you've got a pencil, you have a pencil sharpener. Maybe you're actually not old school. Maybe you're a new school and you're doing it on a device. That's fine. Take notes. Here's Daniel Priestley. Daniel Priestley. I'm looking back at 10 years plus of world-leading accelerators and events in UK, Australia, Singapore, USA. You partner with tons of people. You've got more faculty than I have. All kinds of brilliant people. And you also, and this is not trivial, you're accredited, you're certified by the ILM, Institute of Leadership and Management, which I think is the biggest awarder of qualifications in Europe, and that's a big deal in training. CPD accreditation, all kinds of things. Investors in People, that is not easy, I tell you.
Recently, we got a gold Investors in People.
Fantastic.
And we were shortlisted as the top 10 companies to work for between 10 and 50 employees. So we were runner-up in that. Someone else beat us at the awards night, but we're certainly in the top 10 for investors in people gold.
That's fantastic. And even down to the name of the organization now, I mean, Dent Global, you know, that also the wonderful Steve Jobs phrase, we're here to make a dent in the universe. I'm sure that was deliberate. But take me back to the beginning. How did this all start? Your accent does not sound British, and I know there's good strong links with the Antipodes there. How did it all start?
So I grew up in a place called the Sunshine Coast in Australia, which is exactly as it sounds. It's lots and lots of sunshine and lots of coast. And I kind of looked around, and although it was a beautiful place to grow up, there wasn't a lot of opportunity other than building houses or pest control or hospitality and tourism. And I was kind of excited by the idea of becoming an entrepreneur. And I stumbled across a book called The E-Myth, which came out, I think, in 1995, and I would have seen it in 96, 97. And I was just enamored by the idea that two things. Number one, that I was excited by the idea of creating a business that could scale. It was the first kind of big opportunity that someone had spelt out to me. I was also kind of excited by the idea that someone had written a book and had built a big business off the back of their book. I looked at the actual business model of Michael Gerber writing that book and becoming a little bit famous and well known, but not famous in the sense of stopped on the street famous, but famous in the sense of respected within the business community. And I thought, wow, okay, I'm interested in entrepreneurship. I went to university, and I was sold on this idea that, I could do this degree on small business growth and small business management. When I got to business university, none of the lecturers had actually ever started a business. They had all come up through academia, written a lot of papers on business, but I felt there was a real disconnect, that I wasn't learning from anyone who had done it. And at the same time, I got this opportunity to go and work for an entrepreneur. And he was starting a new company. He was 37 or 38 years old at the time, which to me at the time felt like, wow, he's really old. And, when I was 20, now I'm 39, I'm thinking that he's just getting started, of course. And essentially, I got the opportunity to be employee number 3 in a very fast growth company, what became a fast growth company. I arrived at his beautiful home, and we stood around the kitchen bench, mapping out a launch campaign, mapping out a marketing campaign, and talking about product features. And essentially, I learned more in the first couple of weeks than I had in a year of university. And then we launched big, and we grew to about $6 or $7 million in the first 2 years of revenue. And, so year 2 was like 6 or 7 million. And because I was employee number 3, I had this privileged position of being able to see it all unfold from day one. And I had a great rapport with John, and he gave me transparency on the numbers. He gave me transparency on his decision-making thinking. He let me in on, hiring decisions and why he'd made certain hiring decisions, and all of those kind of things. I got this level of access that most 19, 20-year-olds don't get.
Yes. John who? Sorry, can you remind me the name of the entrepreneur?
The guy's name's John. I won't give you his full name because he likes to be a little bit behind the scenes. He's gone on to make a lot of money and be very, very successful. He's he's got close to 100 million worth of property now, and all of that sort of stuff. The business became very successful. He built and sold several companies, and he's gone on to strength to strength. But the thing for me is I ended up learning a lot in 2 years, and then, as most 21-year-olds do, I got impatient and approached him and said I wanted to have some shares in the company. And he said, listen, if you want shares in the company, you go start your own company. And that was the beginning of a falling out that we had. And I did go off and start my own company, and I built a business very similar to him, based on the same principles. And I went from 0 to 1.3 million in the first year, and then 1.3 to 10.7 in the 3 years after that. So it was a fast growth. Once again, it was fast growth. I replicated it. I hired people. I did all of those kind of things, and I also stood behind the scenes in a big regard. That I was always standing behind the people that, I would hire people in to be the face of the business and to evangelize the business and all of those sorts of things. And I sat behind the scenes conducting the marketing and doing the hiring. And then in 2000, I exited that business. I came to the UK. I had started a great business in the UK, in London, in 2006, 2007. And then in 2008-9, the financial crisis hit, and we took a massive hit to the business. We'd gotten to £4 million of revenue, and after all said and done, in 2009, we dropped down to 400,000. So it was a 90% hit to the business. And the main reason for that is that the two main faces of my business, the two main people that we were promoting, both decided they weren't going to work in the UK anymore. So one focused on Singapore, one focused on the US, and said, look, we're not really going to do anything in the UK. We're focusing on the core of our business, not supporting the UK business. So I ended up with no product to sell. And it was at that time that a consultant said to me, the problem with your business, Daniel, is that you have a brokerage model business. A brokerage model business is that you sell someone else's value. So you're not aware of your own intellectual property. You're only aware of other people's intellectual property. And he said, Daniel, you're actually sitting on a lot of value because you know how to pick key people of influence who are going to succeed. You've got intellectual property about how to promote them, how to run campaigns, how to do marketing around these people. So he said, you have intellectual property that is around what makes a key person of influence successful and how do you market them? And ultimately that became the book oversubscribed in Key Person of Influence. So it was around that time that I discovered that the way you go mining for your own intellectual property is writing a book. And it was no surprise that the people that I was promoting were all authors. These people had done the work of writing a book. And that's why I had discovered them. That's how I had discovered them. That's why I knew they were valuable. And that's why when they took the stage, they could share very deep insights because they'd done. I find that writing a book is a mining process. It's like if you imagine there's all this gold down there in the dirt and you've got to mine into it and go and look for it and dig it up. And the process for doing that when it comes to intellectual property is writing a book. So I went through the process. I was age 29 at that time. And I started writing about my experience of building a $10 million plus company, entrepreneurship. I kind of talked about this key person of influence. I started splitting it up into some stuff worked, some stuff didn't. So I pulled it out and stuck it in a secondary document. And then I released my first book when I was 29 called Key Person of Influence.
Yes. I was in a bookshop at Delhi Airport, actually, and the name itself, the title kind of strikes you as that's something that I aspire to or I want to aspire to. And then you pick it up. And then, so was the title a sort of a key part of that? Or tell me about how it kind of came together.
It almost didn't happen. So I had this. So around the time that I wrote the book in 2009, social media had really ramped up. We'd had MySpace, which was considered to be something that kids were into, and then Facebook had launched, and suddenly social media was a buzz thing for all business owners and experts and leaders and marketers. And suddenly it was like, oh, this thing, social media, Twitter. Wow, okay, Twitter, how do you use Twitter? Blogging, what's blogging all about? So I had kind of been giving a few talks about this to the business networks and saying, this is an engine that you can put behind a personal brand or behind your personality. This kind of takes what you would say at the pub, this puts it out in the global sphere. And I used to say, if you're an expert in your own circle, well, suddenly if you use social media, you're going to be an expert globally and you're going to make a lot of money, by scaling up. And people were really responding they were responding to the excitement that I had around social media. And I thought they were responding to the word expert. And the working title for the book was The Expert Factory. And it was this idea that a normal person could go into some form of refining process refine themselves, refine who they are, their experience, their background, their insights, and come out the other end and be seen as a credible and recognized expert on a global stage. And the kind of, I was playing with the idea, the expert factory, the global expert, playing with that. And I had this young guy on my sales team who had been a medical sales guy, and he was selling in the medical community. He was out there repping for pharmaceutical companies and medical devices. And he said, and he was junior on my team, he was just getting started in the first couple of months. And I shared with him where I was up to in the book. And he said, look, I've got to be honest with you. I hate the word expert. And I said, why is that? He said, well, in the medical community, if you want to call yourself an expert, you have to have a PhD and a doctorate. And he said, to be fair, a lot of these people who are experts aren't really making a lot of money. They might earn, they might earn good money in top 5%, top 10% of society, but they're not earning, mega bucks. They're actually, and they've worked damn hard. They've probably sacrificed 10 years, doing school to become that expert. He said, I don't feel comfortable with the idea that someone could just label themselves an expert without a PhD or some senior qualification. And I kind of went, oh, okay, I hadn't even really interacted with that world. So I see your point, and I'm disappointed because I get your point. Now I feel like I'm stuck without a title. And I said, the essence of the book is not really about being an expert. It's being a key person of influence. It's that person in the middle of the circle who everyone goes to with an opportunity. And he said, well, why don't you just call it key person of influence? I love that.
The effort that we put into crafting a great title, one that's appropriate, one that sells the message, is really worth it. And it paid off in that case. And it became the business model to some extent for what you do forever after.
Yeah, and I think had it been called the Expert Factory or the Global Expert, it wouldn't have worked. It would have really limited us to a marketplace. With a little bit more maturity under my belt, I think anyone who's been in their industry for a while would not want to call themselves an expert unless they genuinely were an expert.
There's a modesty thing involved as well, isn't there? People are very unassuming. At least most of the nice people.
Yeah, exactly. Most of our clients are not the type of people who crave the spotlight. They're actually people who are passionate about something, and they want to say, "Look at that," not "Look at me." That being that key person of influence is actually what people want to be. They want to be the person who's able to influence change and influence their industry and make things happen. They want to move and shake a bit, and get things to change and transform and improve within their industry. And it's not necessarily about big noting themselves. So, and the other thing that worked about the book was also it got shortened to KPI, which is a business acronym for a key performance indicator that people associate with. And someone said to me, I love that it's called KPI because it's almost like you become the benchmark. It's synonymous with being a benchmark. So it's like, oh, that person's the benchmark in my industry. And for whatever reason, that worked as well. And it was good. Yeah, it was a good title. It worked. Now, the title is important. Sometimes I get it right. Sometimes I get it wrong. I became absolutely obsessed with the model that I came up with the book 24 Assets.
Which is great. I have to say, I'm going through it. I'm using it all the way through and realizing all the rubbish I've been doing wrong. Take me through this then.
Well, the title of that book has let the book down. So essentially, one thing that works really well with the title is to name the end state. So to name that thing that people want to end up with. What's the prize? So the prize of getting this right is becoming a key person of influence. That works. The prize of getting this right is to become oversubscribed. You've got people lining up to do business with you. So those two titles, they worked really, really well. And those books have sold tens of thousands, and they keep selling tens of thousands every year. Now, like a parent who's, can't see any fault in their own children, when I was writing 24 Assets, I was so it was almost like that moment that Neo in the Matrix sees through the Matrix. He can see the code of how everything fits together, and suddenly he's like, the world slows down. For me, when I saw 24 Assets, when I recognized these 24 distinct assets that a business could have, I was like, oh wow, this, you know, I'm Neo in the Matrix here. I've just seen how all business fits together. I've seen a way that business can fit together very successfully, and it actually had a big impact on myself. So I trademarked the term 24 assets, and I named the book 24 assets. And look, the book has done well, mainly because people have read KPI and oversubscribed. But the issue with the book 24 Assets is that it doesn't necessarily describe an end state that people want.
There's no promise really in the title.
Yeah, so, you know, your business as an asset or something along those lines. Profitable, scalable, fun. If I called the book Profitable, Scalable, Fun, it probably would have done better. So if I can describe an end state, especially if you can get it in 1 to 3 words, I think actually the biggest home run title that I had was Oversubscribed, because it was that kind of one word that says, yeah, I want to be oversubscribed. I want people lining up to do business with me. That's the desired end state.
Yeah. So let's try and distill some of this. I mean, you don't have time to give me the whole bloomin' KPI program here, but somebody who's watching thinking, you know what, I've got a ton of knowledge, I've got a ton of insights that I want to share. What's the 2 questions for you? One is, let's really nail this. Why should they write a book? How can we persuade them they've got to get that out there? Because they will see it as a waste of time. They'll see it as a bureaucratic process. And then let's give some tips on how to start breaking the back of that process. So why write a book, Daniel?
So why write a book? So number one, the book that changes your life most is the book you write, not a book you read. So if, you know, most people who are listening to this podcast, they probably aim to read 30 or 40 books at least per year. You know, some people, you know, plow through a book a week, and you know, they're really prolific. The thing you'll find after doing that for several years is that it's good and it's directionally correct and it gives you lots of ideas and it's good food for thought. But once you've written a book, you really discover that the book that totally transforms your life is a book you put out there in the marketplace. It brings you opportunity. It brings you speaking engagements. It brings you great employees. It creates culture in your organization. It formalizes your ideas into a framework. You know, you discover and distill, you discover memories that you'd forgotten that are incredibly valuable. And in the writing process, you suddenly remember stuff and remember a case study or an example. You piece things together in the writing process that actually genuinely make you more intelligent in your industry. So you click together insights. So the writing process and putting a book out there changes your life. It's a life-changing activity. You go from previously, up until that point, you weren't an author, and then you become an author, and no one could ever take that away from you. Once you've written a book and it's published, you're an author. So that is a change of life moment. It doesn't matter how many books you've read. No one kind of ever mentions, oh, by the way, this person throughout their life read, you know, hundreds of books. It's like, yeah, okay, so what? Right. Now, it doesn't matter how many books I see behind you. You've got this sign that says, what's your legacy? It doesn't matter how many books you read at the end of your life. You know, you take that with you, but you actually leave behind a book. So if I get hit by a bus, you know, my kids get to kind of understand who I was and what I was thinking by reading the books. I leave behind books that I've written. So that's a lot of the reasons why. At a very basic level, let's say you're an entrepreneur or a leader, the type of book that I always recommend somebody to write is a book that is the perfect business development manager or sales manager who runs around having the perfect conversation with people in order for them to want to buy from you. So a great book should actually be almost a business development manager on steroids. And if you think about a BDM is going to cost you £6,000 to £8,000 to recruit. They're going to cost you £40,000 to £60,000 per year to have on the team. A book is going to cost you, and they're probably going to take up 100 hours a year of your time. 2 hours a week. So for 100 hours, £8,000, and then 60,000 a year, I would say every day of the week, write a book, publish a book, and give away £50,000 worth of them a year. and you will do a lot better than have a BDM. The book can never quit your organization. The book can never set up in competition with you. The book never has a sick day. The book will jump on a plane and fly and meet someone for £1.
I think that's an awesome model, and the way I sometimes describe it is, you buy a conference stand for 10 grand, and it's over in 2 days, and who remembers it anyway? But that book,
exactly.
then continues on somebody's shelf for ages and ages.
Yeah, and look, we give away a lot of books, for that exact reason. The exact reason is I always compare the cost of giving books away to a cost of a salesperson or a business development manager or a conference stand. And there's just no comparison. If I give away 5,000 books in a year, I will do £1 million worth of business the following year. People over time, it's not immediate. People put a book on their desk for a couple of weeks and they stick it on their shelf, and a bunch of people don't even read it at all. But provided you've got a decent, meaty offering that you can offer someone that would warrant a salesperson being out there talking about it, a book's great. I would never say to write a book that is a how-to manual of what you do. That's not the kind of book I recommend. So I'm not saying you go out and educate your competitors of how you do what you do and the behind the scenes. You got to make good choices about what you put in the book. And the right choice is that if you were to give it to a potential customer and they read it, they would close that last page and say, how do I get in touch? Right? Before they finish the end of the book, they're firing an email to your organization saying, we need to talk. And that is the perfect book to put out there.
So assuming somebody is thinking, okay, I'm tipped over, I know I need to write a book, and then they've got to marshal their thoughts, they've got to set the time aside. I had one guy say to me, can't I just get the team each to write a chapter? I think what you say about mining your experience, pulling in the stories, I think there's value in having one overall person kind of pull those threads together. But how would they start? I mean, most people these days, especially senior execs, only type one-line emails. The idea of writing 30, 40, 50, 60,000 words fills me with dread. How do they go about starting that? Should they hire a ghostwriter? What's your best advice, Daniel?
Well, look, a ghostwriter is a misunderstood term. That I've not had a ghostwriter with any of my books. I've had great editors who have helped pull together some waffle and turn 3 paragraphs into one. But I've not had any ghostwriters. But look, I know people who have worked with ghostwriters, and it's a very misunderstood idea. So a ghostwriter is going to sit down with you and map out what you want to say and the key insights that you want, and then they're going to interview you every week, and you're going to have to come up with the good stuff that they're going to write and put into the book, and they're going to pull that together and write what you say and what you share. They're certainly not going to research your industry and come up with some great insights from, if they had wonderful, amazing top insights about your industry, they'd be in your industry making £1 million. So therefore, a ghostwriter is only as good as their client. And essentially, they're just pulling together your thinking and putting it into a document. So some people have this idea that a ghostwriter is going to somehow magically come up with this brilliant content all on their own without any intervention or any input. That's just not how it works. Often a ghostwriter will have to sit in on some of your sales meetings. They'll have to sit in on talks that you're giving. And if you're giving a good talk, if you're sharing good stuff at a sales meeting or presenting a pitch, that's the kind of raw material that they might be able to work with. But if you're not doing those things, then then there's not much a ghostwriter can do. So essentially, I personally, I'm agnostic whether you work with a ghostwriter or you write it yourself. If you've got 10, 15 grand to spend on a good ghostwriter, go ahead and spend it. But there is something magical about sitting down at the keyboard and actually slowing your brain down and having to think through what it is that you're going to say. The process I actually have a bit of a format that I always do, which is I use the introduction to sell the reader on reading the whole book. So the purpose of my introduction is that I want to actually make the case for read the whole book. So here's all the stuff that you're going to get out of the book. Here's the end state. Here's what you're going to be. If you read this book and successfully implement, this is what you're going to get out of it. This is where you'll be. This is how life will be different. And I'm trying to drop some sort of insight into the introduction that makes people go, okay, I'll read this. I will actually take on board. So it's a sales pitch for the book, is the introduction. The first third of my books are designed to try and perturbate, disrupt. I want to get you thinking. I want to challenge your old ideas. So, for example, in Key Person of Influence, it says, careers are over. There's no such thing as a career anymore. It says, things like you're either functional or vital. And the value of a functional person is on the decline, and the value of the vital person is on the rise. So I'm sharing kind of broad insights that should get you thinking and should make you say, oh, wait a second, I need to know a bit more than that. And then it says, do you want to be an expert in microphones, or do you want to be a great singer? And then it says the technology is the microphone, and actually the person who makes all the money is the singer. It's not the person who sets up microphones. So don't worry about the technology, worry about your message. So I'm kind of using analogies, and I'm trying to get people thinking in the first third on just broad terms. Disrupt the world that you think you know, and get people thinking. So for the book Oversubscribed, I start with, the only businesses that make money are oversubscribed businesses. In order to be oversubscribed, someone has to miss out. And that kind of makes people go, but I don't want anyone to miss out. If someone wants to spend money with me, I want to take their money. So, the book of Oversubscribed is this idea that you have to have more buyers than you can sell to. Straight away, it kind of gets people thinking. And then it talks about first an auction, then a negotiation, that you should never have a negotiation unless you first had an auction. So you've got to build a market. You've got to first make a market, then you make your sales. So I start with broad insights to get people thinking. And then the middle third of my books are always about a methodology. So the Key Person of Influence is the 5-step methodology to becoming a key person of influence. Oversubscribed has 6 steps to running campaigns and promotions. 24 Assets has got 7 major categories with 24 assets. So all of my books are essentially sharing a methodology in the middle. Once I've disrupted that thinking, I'm now going to layer in, here's some stuff you should go and do. Here's a new way of thinking. And then the final third of my books are objection handling. So once I give you, this is the method, what should happen is a whole bunch of yeah, buts. Well, yeah, I see what you're saying, but that wouldn't work for me because of X, Y, and Z. Or, yeah, but I haven't got the time to do that. Yeah, but I haven't got the money to do that. Yeah, but I'll just go and do that on my own in my own good time. So essentially all the objections that someone might have, because what I want them to do, by the way, which a lot of authors don't do, and it annoys me, I want people to go and get started. So a lot of authors are just kind of like academic in their presenting of ideas. They just kind of academic.
Here's some lovely ideas. You should be, feel better as a result of knowing this.
Exactly. Whereas my books are very much about stop doing this dumb stuff that's not going to work and go do this. So it's really directive, really punch it. I'm trying to punch the reader into a new way of acting. I want people to literally do something different the following week after reading one of my books. So I'm blatant about that. I tell people, go take this action, go do this thing. Because I'm being so directive in my books, I need to objection handle. People always say, well, you've told me to go and do this, but I'm a bit fearful of that, and here's why. So I try and brainstorm all the reasons why someone might resist, and then I objection handle. And then the final part of my books is about leaving people on a high. So leaving people, reconnecting them with the vision of getting this done, and maybe even a bigger picture. So Oversubscribed actually says, why don't you go and campaign for a different planet? Why don't you use your skills for campaigning, not just to make money, but to change the world? 24 Assets talks about that the world's going to go through massive transformation, and and actually we're all here to do something, which I finish on this idea of asset zero. What would you do if all of this stuff didn't even matter? So I like to leave people on a high and really kind of move it almost, move it beyond the mundane and into something bigger than just making money, bigger than just business. Leave the reader on a high, finish on a high note.
Fantastic structure. I mean, I can see why and how these things are working, do work for you. But why still write books? You've done 4 major ones now, I think. 4. You've got something is on the stocks, I'm sure of it. Why are you keeping on reinventing and relaunching this? Why keep going?
Do you know what? It's funny. I never ever really set out to be an author. And when I had one book, I thought, yeah, okay, great, I've ticked that box. I've got that done. It's kind of like this. Your brain can juggle. Let's say, imagine your brain can juggle 3 balls in the air at any given time. And when it comes to like my ideas or my business, let's say I've got this idea called key person of influence, and it keeps kind of buzzing around in my head. When you open that little brown box and the book is there inside the box, and you go, oh wow, and you go, there's this moment that your brain shifts and you go, oh, all of those ideas are safe. They're safely there. And it's kind of like I don't have to hold on so tight anymore in my head. So I can look at this and go, okay, if ever I want to think about those ideas, I can pick up this book, and I've actually documented them somewhere. In fact, I could go on Amazon and buy my own book, and there's all my ideas.
It seems to be part of your outsourcing strategy. It's how you share the IP, which is kind of bringing us back full circle.
Yeah. So what happens for me, is that a few months later, my brain is like, okay, well, all of those ideas are safe. I've got capacity to have some new ideas. I can evolve my thinking. I can get beyond that. I no longer have to juggle those 3 balls. So what happens is I go, oh, I've ticked the box. I've got that book. Fabulous. 6 months later, I go, I've just had a big idea. Entrepreneur revolution. How does that work? Okay, entrepreneur revolution. This is a great time to be in business. People are resonating with that concept. Technology is shifting things. There was a time where it was better to work for a big company and be a company man or a company woman. And now a lot of talented, smart, dynamic, intelligent people are going off and starting businesses. And there's been 1 million businesses started in the last 5 to 10 years. Maybe there's an entrepreneur revolution taking place. And how do you find your place in the entrepreneur revolution? So my brain just comfortably goes off in this other direction and explores that, knowing full well that all my ideas around key person of influence are safe. So I'm now free to go and explore. And then I put all those ideas in a book. And then I go, okay, now that idea, those are safe. And then I think, oh, okay, oversubscribed, campaigns and promotions, okay. And then those ideas are safe. And then I end up writing 24 assets. And I go, you know what? I'm done. I've written 4 books. I don't need to do this author thing anymore. I'm done with the deadlines and getting books published and all that sort of stuff. I'm sick of it. I'm gonna do other projects. And then one day I'm sitting there and I go, oh, I've just had a big idea. Doubling speed. That's a great idea, about maintaining a certain level of doubling, that every 2 to 3 years you double the business. And I wonder if there are any companies that have maintained doubling speed for decades and decades. Oh, there's a handful of them. There's a few dozen companies that have just doubled and doubled and doubled and doubled. McDonald's and Nike and Lego. It's like, okay, how did they do it? How did they remove the bottlenecks year after year after year? I'm going to research that. So now I'm writing this book called Doubling Speed. And it's like, okay, I'm geeking out on all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, and then I realized, damn it, I'm doing another book. I'm doing it again, aren't I? I will say this. The good news is that the other thing that happens is the royalty checks roll in. So what also kind of is cool is that you go, not only royalty checks, clients, speaking engagements, the whole bit. So your income goes through the roof after having some good books out there, and you think to yourself, actually, I'd be a bit silly not to keep writing books. If people are buying them and if people are enjoying them, and if it's, if it's paying a cracking good, royalty checks are kind of fun because you write, for me personally, I write the book with no royalty checks in mind. I always wrote books as business tools, as brochures on steroids, and kind of, I loved getting them out there as a way of building the business. I never expected to get royalty checks. And then twice a year, along comes, the deposit in the bank account, and you go, oh, that's all right. I don't mind that.
That's nice. So let's deal with this very quickly. Publishing, self-publishing. I'm guessing you must by now have your own imprint and get.
I've done both. So I'm now a major shareholder in Rethink Press, and Rethink Press is a modern new publishing approach. And I'm also published with Wiley, which is a 100-year-old publisher from New York, and one of the biggest publishers in the world. So here's the difference. Big publishers, traditional publishers, they're slow. It might take 18 months to get a book turned around, and to do from contract to publish date is reasonably slow. They are absolutely focused on selling books. So it's all about book sales. In particular, for business books, they have to see that in about 3 years you can sell 6,000 books. That's the minimum. The minimum number of books that they need. That's the break-even point. Now, 6,000 doesn't seem like a lot, 2,000 a year type thing, but bear in mind that they're thinking about selling books, not giving them away. So, you're talking about £10 a book or £9 a book. You are talking about £50,000 worth of book sales that you've got to go off and make in order just to break even on the very basics of the project. So if they can't see a really clear, really fast path to 6,000 book sales, then they're not going to publish it. They won't touch it. So they're obviously looking for upside. They're going to start making money at about 10,000 copies to 20,000 copies, but their break-even point is about 6,000 copies. So, in many cases, for an unknown author, they're going to get you to guarantee 6,000 copies, which essentially means that if you don't sell 2,000 this year, you're going to pick up the slack. If you sell 1,100, you're going to go buy 900 copies off us at full price. So that, for a lot of authors, is a bit of a shock when they finally get that publishing contract through. And it's like, hey, wait a second, I'm underwriting 2,000 copies a year. You're paying me this little tiny advance, but ultimately I'm the one who has to underwrite the book sales. And that's the other thing they look for. They look for people in companies that can underwrite book sales. So that's that's the downside with publishing. And because it's a bit slow, you might have an idea that you're super red hot with at the moment, and 18 months later the world may have moved on a little bit. So it might not be the big hit that you thought. Someone else might have a book in the pipelines and all that. The reason we set up Rethink Press or the reason we've evolved Rethink Press is the idea that you should give books away. So there's an old idea, which is that the old idea is this: authors should sell books. And the new idea is books should sell authors, right? Or books should sell key people of influence in their businesses. So what we've done with Rethink is to try and speed up the process where you can get a book out much faster, half the time type thing. And really the only bottleneck is you writing it. And then the other thing is that the publishing contract is built around giving books away just as much as it is as selling them. So most of our authors, they're the types of people who recognize that they're going to make more money giving 2,000 books away per year than trying to sell 2,000 books. Because if you're running around trying to sell 2,000 books, goodness, the amount of energy to get people to buy a book, you might as well be selling something more high value. And, so most of the real money of it's kind of like the music industry right now. They make a little bit of money off Spotify, enough to buy the bottles of champagne at the after party. But the real money is in touring, and the real money is in merchandise. The real money is in licensing their tracks to movies and to doing licensing deals with products. And the real money is all behind the scenes, and the music is kind of like just the front end thing on Spotify now. So you know, it's the same as authors. Authors, you know, it blows my mind that Wiley have never actually asked me for like a piece of the real action. You know, that they haggle like crazy over the royalties on the book sales. You know, getting them to move from 15 to 16%, you know, is a big deal in the. But what's hilarious, they don't even discuss speaking fees. You know, I might get a speaking fee of £4,000 to £6,000. Wiley never gets any of that, and yet that's where the real, you know, that's you do 10 speaking gigs a year and you make 50-60 grand pretty easily and fun. Just jump on a tube, go down to a local hotel, you know, chat for an hour and come on back, and you've made a few £1,000s. And you know, they're missing a trick. You know, they're really missing.
I think
a trick.
the restructuring of this industry, I mean, it is the disintermediation, the pulling out of that by the internet principally, but by people like you writing books that actually articulate a process that people can then adopt. I've had a blast. I could really pin you to the wall for the next 6 hours, because there's so much coming out of your mouth, which is amazing. Thank you so much for that. I think that the couple of key takeaways for me, I love your idea of the structure of the book, you know, selling the idea, pre-selling the idea, disrupt their world, the reader's world, the methodology which you're sharing without giving too much away behind the scenes. Love the idea of objection handling. You know, it's almost a very explicit mind-selling process as you take people through this, leaving them on a high. And in a sense, you and this is where we started, you basically articulated a way of helping people get their IP out. So I hope that the folks who've, you know, heard you describe this process can now go away and do something or make a start on that. A final piece of advice from you. What's your sort of closing thoughts for somebody?
Well, the closing thought is write the book and give 1,000 copies away every year, and see and watch your life change. Like, honestly, if you get a good looking book out there with a good title and some good ideas in it, and you give 1,000 of those away every single year, watch your life change. Like, just watch yourself go from strength to strength. You'll find yourself on stages and on planes and, you know, having fun and getting inbound opportunities that you've never experienced before pre-book.
Astonishing insights from somebody very, very successfully written 4 or 5 books with others on the go. And I hope giving you some practical ideas, not only about the economic benefits of that, but also some of the how-tos, the idea of, you know, the structure of your book. I think, Shreyas, you picked up on that earlier as well. This idea of focusing on make your book actionable, which is different from those of you who were with us on the Peter Larange Summit interview, was talking about be reflective and not so prescriptive. Well, here's a different view, a different way of seeing the world. So think about that. Think about you and what you want to achieve. I'm hoping that through absorbing these different ideas on the summit, on the different interviews and the different approaches that you will have seen, that you can find something that's relevant for you. That's an approach that's relevant for you. Some other how-tos from Daniel, definitely around the title. Give some thought to the title. The idea of the end state. What is the end state that you want the reader to reach? What is the transformation that you want to take them through? Share the method, share the model. And I think, Shreyas, you said this as well. Don't forget to help free people from the objectives. So handle those objections. Thank you so much for sparing the time to be with us today. There are other interviews here that will build on this, but that for me was one of the highlights of the entire summit, simply because of the positive attitude Daniel has towards getting the message out, structuring it, taking responsibility for the publishing. That's what clearly he urges you to do as well. In the summit sessions that we have coming up this afternoon, if you're able to do that, it'd be fantastic to see you. If you are watching this on a replay, then these are the videos that I would suggest you go take a look at now. Marshall Goldsmith at 2 p.m. British summertime this afternoon on how to package your materials, your products, your services into distinct books. And we'll talk specifically about What Got You Here Won't Get You There, which is a multi-million seller, Mojo and Triggers. So some good insights there from Marshall Goldsmith. I have to say, fanboy here. I got sucked into, I've been pretty good on the interview so far, keeping people on, let's talk about the books rather than the content. I got sucked a bit into the content with Marshall. That's my fault. Then Karen Dillon on writing. So she's been responsible for some of the most best-selling books that Harvard Business Press has ever put together, and is a co-author of the most downloaded article that Harvard Business Review in its 75-year history has ever published. So we need to pay attention to what she has to say on how to engage and inspire your readers with your work. And then we'll wrap up with Steve Piersanti, who's the founder of Berrett Kohler Publishers, on how to write a really great book. But he's got some warnings as well. He wrote a fantastic blog article called The Awful Truths of Publishing, and that's well worth paying attention to. So I hope you can join us for the summit if you're watching live. If you're watching on the replay, go now and watch Marshall Goldsmith, Karen Dillon, and Steve Piersanti. It's been an absolute blast over the last 45 minutes. I look forward to seeing you again in the next summit interview. Take care.
Wow.